Morning, everybody. So today I'm here to talk about something which might find some common ground with you. I'm here to talk about how can surfers save humanity. Now, I get that that's a bit of a crazy question, so we can already put me in a slight box. I get that. And I also get that some of you might be sitting there thinking, what on earth have those people who put rubber on at crazy times of the year and wade into the water, or possibly those bronzed athletes who run into the sea to try and tackle giant waves, got to do with saving humanity? And I think that's a really good question. But before we get to that, what I really want to talk about for a second is what surfing means to me. And this was my turning point. I've been obsessed with surfing since I can remember. And so much so, do you remember back in the 2000s when you could do a degree in anything? And this is something that I haven't admitted to anybody for 20 years. I've tried to hide it. I've said I did something different. So, I'm being vulnerable. I did a degree in surfing, right? Yeah, that's right. And it wasn't just, I did a Bachelor of Science in surfing. And I get a lot, at the time I got a lot of comments saying, was the shaka practice pretty difficult? And it was, that was a difficult part of it. But it led me to my turning point. And my turning point happened actually in the Maldives last year. I'd been working with a great buddy of mine for 10 years, forwarding his vision and ideas of how we could create different engineering solutions. And 18 months ago, I decided that it was amazing to do that, but I wanted to go and follow my own vision. Being slightly naive and impetuous, I walked out into the world after doing that for 10 years with a good salary, and I didn't really have a vision, so I didn't know what I wanted to do, and it was a bit silly, actually. And I was surfing in the Maldives, and I suddenly thought, if climate crisis is real, we're going to see certain things. In crisis, we see spikes in innovation, but we also start to see certain changes and revolutions that might happen. And as a surfer, I started to think that possibly I'm part of a community that's on the margin, a fringe movement. And these typically happen where you have a shared bond, a glue, a cement that binds you to different people, and you feel like you have that trust in that fringe movement. And it also led me to think that possibly the change, the revolution that happens, always happens from a spark, that it comes from a fringe movement. That fringe movement is the spark for revolution. And I want to give you 3 examples of revolutions. The first one I want to talk about is the golden age of pirates. I know I'm going on slight tangents here because I was talking about surfing and now I'm talking about pirates. But Blackbeard here was instrumental in certain areas. And there's a brilliant book called Be More Pirate. I recommend you go and read it because we haven't got enough time to go into it in detail. But essentially when Blackbeard was around, the Royal Navy was the largest navy in the world, and they were a pretty harsh employer. If you broke the rules, what happened is you got your wrists and ankles chained together, and you were dragged underneath the boat. It was called keel hauling. If you didn't die from drowning, you probably died from the cuts of the barnacles. What happened was that a splinter group formed, and they said, this isn't right. We actually want to have something different. We don't want to be treated in a way where we are totally suppressed the whole time. So they started their own self-governing, localized democracy. And we can still see that now in communities and companies, what was led by these pirates, this golden age of pirates, slightly different of what we might think of as pirates today. But these guys had something amazing. They had something which was creative at the time. It'd be 80 years, like I said, till the French Revolution. They had something which was 1 vote per pirate, no matter what your race was, what your creed was, or what your gender. You had 1 vote per pirate. The second revolution I want to talk about is the civil rights movement. And it took a fringe movement, a tiny group of left-wing intellectualists. Now, you guys will know this story. And we haven't got perfect equality across the world yet. But if it hadn't been for those people who stood there and Martin Luther King saying, I have a dream that one day we're going to have a world that has better equality, we wouldn't be where we are today. We sit in a room which is full of free thought and free speech. And this has come about more and more because of these revolutions that have happened. And the last one I want to talk about is, The last one I want to talk about is radio. In the 1960s, you were lucky if you got 30 minutes of contemporary radio on the BBC. Nowadays, we listen to the BBC and we have contemporary radio all the time. And as I get older, I feel like I can't relate to it so much. But we were in a time then where you didn't have this contemporary radio all the time. And it took a band of people to go out beyond the jurisdiction of the British government in a boat and say, we're gonna broadcast music. And it took till 1967, until the maritime laws, till they got shut down. But what have all three of these actually got in common? And this is really what I want to talk about, is because all three of these were discredited. We still hear the lies today about where these groups were discredited. They were demonized and harassed. And if you think about that, why is that? Because the center that controls the society, the people or the groups that control the center, don't want to give up what they have. These fringe movements are coming to actually change that. And that's not great for these people who are very comfortable in the center. And so what happens is they start spreading these lies. Like, if black and white people work together, we will ruin the economy. If we have contemporary music playing all the time, our youth will be ruined. And we know that's not really true. History has shown us that actually this isn't true. And possibly we are on the verge of a new social revolution. We are seeing brave people stand up and say, look, what we're doing to the planet isn't right. And we're seeing fractions of the center saying, do you know what? They're talking lies. If we change to more sustainable manufacture, if we change to more sustainable food manufacture or energy or transport, the economy will be ruined. And ladies and gentlemen, what I want to say to you is, I don't think that's true. I think the reality is that wealth will be generated in a different place. And that's what makes revolution interesting. But what on earth has this got to do with surfing? So what about these crazy guys who slide down these massive waves? What on earth has any of this got to do with surfing? Well, like I said, I believe that we need a spark to start revolution. We need those brave individuals to stand up and actually start these processes of change. But we also need the kindling. We need groups of people who can share and spread a positive message. And this is where, to me, surfing comes in. Now, you might think of surfers like this guy, right? A bit of a beach bum, stoned, unmotivated. I want to take a couple of minutes and look at this and say, maybe I can dispel that argument. Surfers are an interesting group. There's 35 million of us around the world, and we're all connected with a shared bond of chasing waves, of trying to get that joy of riding a wave. We are actually incredibly motivated some of the time to get that wave, to get that dopamine hit. We wake up at strange hours in the morning, we go surfing in really horrendous weather, and we love it. And the main thing I think about surfers is that they sit on the front line of the environment. They see it day in, day out. They see what's happening to the climate crisis. If you look, for example, at the Maldives, that's a whole nation we might lose because of sea level rise. Just imagine that for a second. One of the future generations might lose a whole nation. How many of us can say that we've actually seen a whole nation being lost? But I think also surfing goes beyond this. It actually has an influence beyond our community. Take, for example, Mark Randolph, co-founder of Netflix, now using his time and money to advocate for climate crisis. And did this come about because he's a very avid surfer, because of the community that he's been immersed in? Or what about Iceland, that has 5% of the grocery market in the UK, and are doing more to combat the environmental hazards of actually supermarkets and what they do? And the managing director, Richard Walker, avid environmentalist and huge surfer. And did this come about because he's a surfer and his father? But I also think surfing has got something unique and a set of super attributes. We have permeated mass society more times than I think is realized. What about, for example, the board short, which I'm sure many of the guys here have actually owned, and it's ubiquitous across many beaches, was invented in the 1960s by Jeff Hackman. Or Patagonia, who said no to fast fashion. We're going to create a brand that actually you can buy a piece of clothing and it lasts for a lifetime. And they were laughed at. They were told by the fashion industry, this is never going to work. And now they are $1 billion business. Or what about Outerknown more recently, who are actually collaborating with brands like Levi's and Breitling and changing the way they actually look at manufacturing? What about music with the Beach Boys, Jack Johnson, Sublime, Weezer, the list goes on and on. Or art, or film. But you know something, when a medium is really taken seriously, it's those advertising executives who actually start using it. And we know that something is a really big influence on our community when you start seeing it in adverts. And I think everybody can remember when we've actually seen these adverts in the past. The Guinness advert, good things come to those who wait. This was in the top 10 adverts of all time. And we've seen many, many car adverts with surfboards on their roof, and luxury brands with surfboards on their roof. And, all these kind of things. Surfing has been used over and over again. Right when I was doing the research for this, actually, salad dressing they've had surfing involved in America. But the biggest thing I think surfing has, as a community to spread a good message, is that it is enjoyed by the young and the young at heart. And why is this important for a revolution? Why do you need that respect? Because we need the respect of our elders. We need to actually sit back and say, we need their wisdom. But at the same time, we need the respect of our youth. We need to look at them for their ideas, their motivation, their enthusiasm, and we need to connect that, not divide it. So if we have these surfers, and there's 35 million of them, how do we connect them? We went out to some of the best surfers in the world, and we said to them, do you want a planet that can sustain all life for your great-grandchildren? And obviously there was a resounding yes, because if they'd answered with a no, they'd probably be sociopaths. But so there was a resounding yes to this question. And what we've done from that is actually create a platform which we call TEDxEarth, where we unite, we educate, and we say, look, this is the things that we can do with incremental change, and we also invest in innovative projects. And I think what makes us unique is we don't take 1 cent for hidden management charges. We put every single penny into innovative projects. But what is your takeaway? Because you're here today to take ideas, share them, disagree with them, agree with them. What's your takeaway? So you've heard from me why I'm so passionate about surfing, and you might agree with it or not. But the reason I'm passionate about it is because it connects me viscerally with the environment. It gives me an amazing sense of well-being, and it also gives me that shot of dopamine. And that, to me, is actually what I think the climate crisis is caused by, because I think many of us have a deep void inside ourselves where we're actually unhappy. We do jobs that we kind of pretend we like, and at the weekend we go and spend money to distract ourselves and get that dopamine hit from actually spending money. So my takeaway for you all is to say, if you could do one thing this weekend which reconnects you with the planet, reconnects you with a group of people, possibly that would be a great thing to go and do this weekend. And if you don't feel like pulling on rubber and joining the surf community, then possibly just go and join a walking group. Go and do some beach cleaning. Go and do some mountain biking. I know you as an audience probably do all of that all the time, but I think actually maybe we could do a little bit more. And I think that connection back to the planet could actually do more than anything else we think. You've all been amazing. Thank you very much.